My name is Dana Whitfield. I am 29 years old, 6 weeks ago. My stepmother stood in my father's kitchen, the kitchen I grew up cooking eggs in, and told 2 police officers that I had attacked her son. She's always resented him, Carol said, one hand pressed to her chest like she was the one bleeding. She's never accepted this family. Her son, Tyler, 22 years old, sat on the counter holding an ice pack to a cheek that had no mark on it, and said, "She came at me. Ask anyone. Nobody asked me anything." I stood in the doorway in my coat, keys still in my hand, and watched a police officer write my name down in a little notebook like it was already decided. Then the older officer, a woman with gray at her temples, looked at me for a second too long and said, "You might want a lawyer." Not for this. For whatever's coming after this. I didn't understand what she meant. Not yet. If you've ever been the one everyone was ready to believe was guilty, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what age you were when you learned your family had already decided who you were before you did anything. I read every comment. Let me take you back to the beginning. Because none of this, the accusation, the boy's phone, the will, any of it makes sense unless you understand what my father built and who he built it for. It started on a Tuesday, March 3rd, 6:14 p.m. I know the exact time because I still have the text thread saved. Carol, we need to talk about the house before the will reading Friday. Just so there's no confusion. Me, confusion about what? Carol, your father wasn't himself at the end. You know that. I don't want this to get ugly. I stared at that message for 11 minutes before I answered. My father, Robert Whitfield, had died 19 days earlier. Pancreatic cancer, diagnosed in September, gone by February 12th. He had been himself enough to argue with the oncologist about second opinions until the last week of his life. He had been himself enough to call me every Sunday at 9 a.m. for 11 years. That Sunday call is the thing I miss the most. The calls started when I was 18, the year I left for college, and he started working Saturdays at the hardware store he owned to make ends meet after the divorce from my mother. Every Sunday, 9 a.m., no matter what. He'd ask about my classes. Later, my job. Later, my apartment, my car payment, whether I was eating vegetables. But before the calls, there was the store itself. I was 7 years old the first time he let me stand behind the register. On a milk crate he'd flipped upside down so I could see over the counter. He didn't let me touch the drawer. He let me watch him count it, out loud, twice, the way he counted it every single closing shift for 31 years. Say the number back to me, Dana. I'd say it back. He'd nod like I'd done something important, even when all I'd done was repeat 4 digits. By 10, I had a job that was mine and only mine, restocking the fastener wall every Saturday morning before the store opened. Washers by size left to right. Lag bolts separated from wood screws even though customers mixed them up constantly, and he never once let me get lazy about sorting them back correctly. People trust that wall to be right, he told me. That's the whole business, Dana, not the tools. The trust. He taught me to change a tire in that store's parking lot when I was 16, kneeling next to me in his gray Dickies work pants, the concrete still holding the day's heat under both our knees. He didn't do it for me once, not even the first time, even when I was slow and my hands were shaking a little on the lug wrench. Cross the bolts, Dana. Star pattern. Never in a circle? Why not in a circle? Because a circle looks even and isn't. The wheel warps. You tighten it wrong, it feels right for 100 miles, and then it isn't. Star pattern's the only way the pressure actually lands even. All the way around. I didn't understand until years later that he wasn't only talking about tires. I still cross the bolts in a star pattern. I probably always will. Every year on the Saturday closest to my birthday. He closed the store 2 hours early, the only day of the year he did that, and drove me 40 minutes to the diner in Millbrook that made the pie my grandmother used to make before she died. Because he'd never learned the recipe, and this was the closest thing left. We didn't talk about anything important there. That was the point. It was one of the only hours of my childhood that didn't require me to be useful, responsible, or fine. When Carol married him, I was 23, Tyler was 16, the Sunday calls didn't stop. They just got shorter, because Carol didn't like him spending an hour on the phone with me in the next room. I noticed. I never said anything. The birthday pie trip stopped entirely after the second year of their marriage. It's a lot of driving, and Tyler's got his game on Saturdays now. And he never suggested a replacement. I didn't ask for one. That's not the kind of thing you ask for. That's not bitterness. That's just the arithmetic of my childhood, extended into adulthood. Whatever time and money existed, Tyler received it first, and I received what was left. And I was expected to say thank you for the leftovers, $40,000 for Tyler's out-of-state tuition at a school he dropped out of after 3 semesters. $22,000 for the Jeep he wrecked 8 months later, replaced without a single condition attached. $0 for my community college textbooks, which I paid for working weekends at a call center. Because you're the responsible one, you'll figure it out. I did figure it out. That was never the problem. The problem was that being competent became the excuse to give me nothing. And being difficult became the excuse to give Tyler everything. There's a specific kind of math you learn to do as a kid in a house like that. And you don't even realize you're doing it until you're an adult adding it up on purpose. The summer I was 14, Tyler broke a neighbor's greenhouse window with a baseball, and my father paid $340 to replace it without a word to him about it. The summer I was 15, I broke a glass in our own kitchen by accident. And I spent 3 Saturdays working the store unpaid to make it right, because Carol said it was about respect, not the money. Same house. Different currency depending on whose hand did the breaking. When Tyler turned 18, there was a party, a real one, a rented hall, 60 guests, a $2,100 catering bill I only knew about because I helped Carol proof the invoice. When I turned 18, 4 years earlier and before Carol, my father took me to Millbrook for pie, same as every year, and it was enough, because I didn't know yet what enough was going to start meaning in that house. By the time I was 26, I was the one who drove up on a Tuesday night when Carol's car battery died in a grocery store parking lot. The one who filled out Tyler's job applications. For him twice because he gets so anxious with paperwork. The one who remembered to renew my father's prescription. Refills after his diagnosis because Carol kept forgetting the pharmacy's hours. None of that showed up anywhere. Not in a will. Not in a thank you. It just got absorbed. The way a sponge absorbs water without anyone noticing the sponge is doing anything at all. That's not bitterness. That's just the arithmetic of my childhood, extended into adulthood. Whatever time and money existed, Tyler received it first, and I received what was left. And I was expected to say thank you for the leftovers. The night it happened was April 9th, the day after the will reading. The reading itself had been short and strange. Mr. Kessler had only summarized in general terms, said the specifics would come in a private follow-up, and left both Carol and Tyler with the impression, correctly, that they hadn't gotten what they expected, and incorrectly, that I somehow had. I'd come to the house at 7:15 p.m. to pick up a box of my father's tools, the star pattern lug wrench included, that Carol had said 3 weeks earlier and before any of this that I could have. It was 61 degrees out, overcast, the kind of gray evening light that makes everything look a little flatter than it is. I remember the smell of the garage exactly. WD-40, cut grass from the mower Tyler hadn't put away, and the particular mustiness of cardboard boxes that had sat in a cold garage all winter. I was crouched by the workbench, going through a box labeled Dad, Misk in his own handwriting, when I heard the door from the kitchen open behind me at 7:38 p.m. I know the time because I checked my phone right after. Out of habit, the way you do when something's about to matter. Tyler didn't say hello. "You think you're getting the store?" he said. His voice had the specific pitch it got when he'd been drinking a little. Not drunk, just loose enough to skip the part where he'd normally hold back. Mom told me what the lawyer said on the phone. "You think you're just going to walk in and take his whole life?" I stood up slowly, the lug wrench still in my hand, and set it down on the workbench, deliberately, where he could see me set it down. "I don't know what the lawyer said, Tyler. I haven't seen the will." "Nobody has. That's the whole point of a private reading." "Don't lie to me." He took a step closer. Then another. Close enough that I could smell the beer. Everybody always just gives you the benefit of the doubt. The responsible one, the good one. You've been playing that for 20 years. I'm not playing anything. I came for a box of tools. You came to gloat. I came at 7:15, Tyler, before you were even home. Ask Carol. He didn't ask Carol. He got closer instead. Close enough that I put a hand up. Not a fist. Not a swing, just my palm flat against his chest. The way you'd stop a door from closing on you, to hold the distance between us. That was the entire extent of any contact I made with him, before, during, or after that night. One flat palm, for maybe half a second. "Get off me," he said loud, and shoved backward into the shelf behind him, hard enough that a paint can and a coffee can full of loose screws hit the concrete floor together, screws scattering in every direction across the floor I used to sort by size on Saturday mornings. Carol was in the doorway within 4, maybe 5 seconds. I don't know how she got there that fast unless she was already standing just inside the kitchen listening. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't look at the screws on the floor, or at Tyler's hands, which were empty and uninjured, or at me, standing 3 full feet back from him with my hands visibly at my sides. "She hit him," Carol said. "To no one? To the garage? To the air?" in a voice pitched to be heard by someone who wasn't even there yet. "I saw her hit him. I didn't touch him except to push him off me when he got in my face," I said. "There's screws all over the floor, Carol. Look at the floor." "Tyler, honey, are you hurt?" "Let me see." She crossed to him and cupped his jaw in both hands, turning his face like she was checking for a bruise that did not exist and would never exist, because there had been nothing to leave one. "She came at me," Tyler said. Quieter now. "Not looking at me. Call the police," Carol said. "Now, Carol, this is insane. Nothing happened. Ask him what actually are now, Tyler," he called. I stood in the garage for 11 minutes, not moving, not touching anything, while Carol stood in the doorway watching me like I might run, and Tyler sat on an overturned bucket holding his own jaw with a hand that had never been struck. That's the scene the cold open showed you. The kitchen after the officers arrived and moved us inside. The notebook. The officer's warning on her way out the door. What none of us knew, standing in that garage at 7:38 p.m., was that the neighbor's 15-year-old son, Marcus, had been in the driveway the whole time, phone propped against a flower pot, filming himself attempting a skateboard trick for his own video, and that the open garage door, and everything inside it, sat squarely in the frame for the full 4 minutes and 12 seconds of footage, time-stamped and untouched. The reveal came 8 days later, in a conference room on the 9th floor of a building downtown, from a man named Arthur Kessler who had been my father's estate attorney for 11 years. Mr. Kessler was not dramatic. He set down a folder, adjusted his glasses, and talked to me like I was a person instead of a problem to be managed. "Your father restructured his estate on January 6th, he said. 6 weeks before he passed. He was of sound mind. I have the notarized capacity evaluation right here, dated the same day, if anyone asks." He slid a paper across the table. The hardware store valued at $310,000. The house on Larkspur, $284,000. A brokerage account currently at $9,600. Total estate value, approximately $690,400. He let that number sit for a second. 80% of the estate, the store and the brokerage account, goes to you. The house goes to Carol for her lifetime, and then to you upon her passing, per your father's specific request that she not be without a home. I sat very still. "Tyler," Mr. Kessler continued, "receives $15,000 structured as a lump sum, with a letter from your father attached that I am instructed to give him separately. $15,000. After 22 years of everything first, there's something else," Mr. Kessler said. "Your father left specific instructions that this document not be discussed with Carol or Tyler until it came from me directly, in this room with you present. He was explicit about that. He used the word protect." I asked him why. He turned the folder toward me and tapped a clause near the bottom. He said Carol had asked him twice to remove you from the will entirely. Once in October, once in January, 4 days before he changed it. Carol's response when she got the call from Kessler's office was not confusion. It was a text to me at 4:52 p.m. that same day. "Carol, we're trying to protect this family from what your father did while he was scared and dying. This isn't over. My lawyer will be filing for a capacity review. You should be ashamed." 40 minutes later, a second text. "Carol, if you push this, I'll make sure everyone knows what you did to Tyler in that garage. See how the store looks then. I saved both." The buried history came from my Aunt Renee, my father's younger sister, who called me 2 nights later, her voice low, like she was somewhere Carol might hear her. "There was a first wife," Renee said. "Before you were born? Before your mother, even. Man named Harold Preston 3 towns over. Carol was married to him 19 years. He had a stroke in 2009. left her his auto shop in the will, and about 4 months before he died, he changed the will to cut his own daughter, Renee's college roommate's cousin, down to almost nothing. Everyone thought it was Carol's idea. Nobody could prove it until the daughter found a letter in his desk, years later saying he'd been pressured, that Carol told him his daughter was unstable and couldn't handle money. Renee still had the letter. Harold's daughter had scanned it and sent it to her in 2019, in case it ever mattered again. It mattered again. The break in the family came from Tyler, of all people. 9 days after the garage, he showed up at my apartment at 8:10 p.m., unannounced, and stood in the hallway not coming in. Marcus showed me the video, he said, before his mom made him delete it off social media. I saw it before it was gone. I waited. You never touched me, he said. I shoved into the shelf myself. I was mad and I wanted it to be your fault instead of mine. And Mom just ran with it so fast I didn't even have to lie again after the first 10 seconds. Why are you telling me now? Because she's already telling people you're dangerous. And I let her. And I don't know how to fix 22 years of being the reason things were unfair to you, but I can start with not letting her lie about this too. He asked if there was any way to earn back something that resembled trust. I told him I didn't know yet. I told him showing up was a start, not an ending. The reckoning happened in public 3 weeks later. At the reading of Harold Preston's estate follow-up hearing, Renee had quietly helped his daughter reopen the matter years back, and it happened to fall during the same window as my own case, in the same courthouse, on the same floor. Carol was there for a deposition about her own capacity review filing against my father's estate. I was there with Mr. Kessler. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Carol's lawyer was reviewing a document, Marcus's video, subpoenaed after Renee quietly encouraged Marcus's mother to preserve the original file instead of the deleted social post, time-stamped 7:41 p.m. April 9th, showing Tyler shoving backward into the shelf entirely on his own, my hand never leaving a flat, static position against his chest. Carol's lawyer looked up at her. You told them she hit him, he said. Not a question. You have the letter too, I said. The one from Harold's desk? The one where you told a dying man his own daughter couldn't be trusted with money. Carol did not have an answer for either the phone or the letter. In a hallway with 4 other people watching, including her own lawyer, that was the first time in 6 weeks I saw her go quiet. The consequences settled over the following months. Carol's capacity review petition against my father's estate was withdrawn by her own attorney, who cited insufficient grounds, legal language, for we cannot win this, and I will not be filing something in front of a judge who has already seen the video and the letter. She paid $6,200 in legal fees for a filing that never got anywhere. The police report from the garage was formally closed as unfounded. On record, she kept the house on Larkspur, as my father wanted, but the neighborhood association fined her $1,800 that summer for a code violation she'd normally have fought. She didn't have the energy left to fight anything else. Tyler moved out of her house in August and got an apartment 35 minutes from the hardware store. He started coming in on Saturdays, not to work the register yet, just to learn the inventory system, the way I once learned to cross bolts in a star pattern. Carol called me in October. I think it's time we put this behind us, she said. Family is family. You could come for Thanksgiving. Things can go back to normal. I thought about what normal had meant for 11 years. The shortened Sunday calls, the leftovers, the notebook the officer wrote my name into. I'm not interested in going back to how things were, I said. I'll see Tyler when he wants to see me. I'm glad the house is still yours. But I'm not walking back into being the person who has to prove she didn't do something. Every single time you decide it's useful for me to have done it. She didn't raise her voice. I didn't either. There was nothing left to raise it about. 3 months after the will reading, Mr. Kessler called and asked me to come back to the office. My father had left a second sealed envelope, to be given to me only after the estate matter has fully resolved. His words, written on the outside in his own handwriting. Inside was a letter, 4 pages, dated January 6th, the same day he changed the will. Dana, if you're reading this, it means the lawyers did their job and some part of what I was afraid of actually happened. I'm sorry for that. I hoped I was wrong. I want you to know this wasn't a punishment against Carol or Tyler. I loved them both, in the complicated way you love people who take more than they give. But I spent 11 years watching you get less because you never made anyone feel guilty for it. And I let that go on too long because it was easier than the fights it would have started. The store is yours because you're the only one who ever asked me how it was doing, instead of how much it was worth. The lug wrench is yours because you're the only one who ever learned to use it. Cross the bolts in a star pattern. Take care of the people who show up. Let go without guilt of the ones who only show up for what's left over. I love you. I always called on Sundays because it was the best hour of my week. Dad, I read it twice in Mr. Kessler's office, and once more in my car in the parking garage. Alone, with the engine off. If there's one thing I'd want you to take from this, it's that the people who are quickest to accuse you are often the ones with the most to hide from the accusation itself. Proof doesn't erase the exhaustion of having needed it in the first place. But it does end the argument. My father spent 11 years calling me every Sunday instead of explaining himself to a room. In the end, that was the whole case for who I was. Some inheritances aren't property. They're proof someone was paying attention the whole time.